Hi everyone, Amy here with my midweek update for week 3. We are already through our first unit and moving toward the end of the summary essay and doing our peer review workshop this week. So that's what I'm mostly going to focus on in my video today. Do make sure you check out our to-do list for this week if you haven't already. You can also find that under the week 3 module in content. And then also check out my wrap-up video for week 2 that covers my feedback on the discussions you completed last week. So let's go ahead and jump into our peer review discussion for the summary essay, way down here at the bottom. All right, and since this is our first workshop peer review discussion, it's a little bit different than the discussions you've done the first 2 weeks of class, and it is our only discussion for this week. So just a heads up in case you were a little bit confused about that. I did go ahead and post some instructions for how to go through the process of completing the workshop. Most of you did a really good job posting your original drafts here in your own threads by Wednesday night at midnight. There's some information here in this post about what to do if you haven't posted your rough draft already. Please do try to get it up there as soon as possible if you haven't posted your rough draft yet. I will allow you to post your rough drafts until midnight on Friday without losing the 10%, but you will lose a few points from this week's discussion for your original thread not being up there in time. But if you haven't posted your rough draft yet, make sure you do get it up there because the 10% loss from the essay assignment is a lot bigger deal than just the few points you might lose for being late on your original post in the discussion for this week. So this kind of talks about that a little bit. The other thing to remember is that we want everyone to get feedback this week, so make sure that you do comment on one of your peers' drafts that hasn't yet received feedback from anyone else. No one's gotten feedback yet from any of their classmates, so everyone is pretty much free game right now. But when you come in to do your comments on each other's essays, sometimes what I like to encourage is just posting a little initial comment saying, I am going to review your paper, so that you can kind of call dibs on it, so to speak, and so that no one else will get started on a review of that essay while you are completing your review, because the review does take a little while to complete. So along with that, I wanted to emphasize that there are 2 parts to the review, 2 things that you'll need to do for your classmate that you choose by midnight tomorrow night, Friday. You need to first of all download your classmate's essay, save it to your computer, and then you can actually fill in comments by using the comment feature under the Review tab in Microsoft Word. So let me show you an example of how to do that. If I wanted to comment on Nikki's essay here, I could just highlight a certain section, go up to where it says Review at the top, and click New Comment. Then I can type my comment right into the text box, save it to my computer, and then upload the commented on and marked up draft as an attachment in reply to that person's original thread. The other thing I want to point out is that beyond just marking up the draft, you actually have to answer all 9 of the questions included here in the instructions for this discussion in complete sentences and provide your classmate with a copy of those answers as well. So after you review your partner's essay, there are actually 2 documents that you will upload in your comments. One is the draft itself marked up with your feedback, and the other is your answers to all 9 of these questions. So just make sure that you're completing the entire review process so that your classmates get really good useful feedback. And you can also get some tips from watching the peer review workshop videos under content for this week. They're also linked to here in my post within the discussion. Okay, so mainly what I'm going to focus on here is the things that I saw that were working well in your drafts. Overall, I was pleased. You know, this is the first essay assignment that we've done this semester, and so I'm always kind of hesitant or interested, we can say, to see what kind of work the class is going to turn out with. Some classes are way far ahead of others, and I was relatively pleased this semester to see what you guys came up with for your rough drafts. Most of them are pretty far along. All of them are at least complete. I wouldn't say that they are all ready to be turned in. There's certainly some errors I want to address, but overall you guys did do a good faith effort to get your drafts complete and turned in for the rough draft here. So good job with that. So I'm going to break up my comments here into the three primary components of summary: the thesis, the reasons that the writer uses to support the thesis, and then what to do with the evidence that the writer uses to prove their points. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the citations and attributive tags because I can tell that some of you were struggling with that as well. So to talk about the thesis first, the biggest comment that I want to make is that when you are addressing the writer's thesis right at the beginning of your summary, you want to make sure that you state what that writer's actual argument is, not just the topic being discussed. So you really want to indicate what is Johnson's position on this topic, not just the topic at hand. Because remember, thesis and argument are very closely tied together, and so if you just present the topic, you're really not presenting the author's thesis. You actually have to represent their actual argument to get an accurate representation of the thesis. So let me show an example of that. I am going to pull up some of your rough drafts as examples, but rest assured I'm only going to pick on the people that I think are pretty far along. So if I give you some suggestions here, I'm not trying to make you feel bad or pick on your draft. It's actually a sign that I think you're mostly on the right track and that other students have there are things in your draft that other students can emulate and learn from. And so, you know, everyone has a little bit of work they can do in their revision, so I'm going to try to highlight the ones here that I think would really push a couple of your drafts further into that area where they could actually be successful as a final draft. So, I'll go ahead and start with Rocky's essay. I want to show you an example of what I mean when I say that you have to present not only the topic, but actually also paraphrase Johnson's position on that topic. So, for example, Rocky starts out with a sentence here that doesn't exactly represent Johnson's overall argument. And so the reason I'm pulling up Rocky's as an example is because I think, Rocky, you do a really good job overall paraphrasing the supporting points throughout your summary in your own words. You're very successful with that. You also do a good job avoiding specific evidence for the most part. But here, right at the beginning, your paraphrase of the author's thesis is a little bit incomplete or also a little bit inaccurate and focuses a little bit too much on specific examples. So remember that Johnson's argument, is not about tweeting online, it's not about cancer diagnoses, it's not even about Jeff Jarvis. This argument is about what Johnson says are the benefits of sharing online and how every person can make an ethical decision for themselves about what to share so that they can be part of this movement while also not harming themselves or damaging their own reputation online. So something along those lines about the issue of sharing online in general, the fact that Johnson thinks it's a good thing, and the fact that he does point out some caveats or some areas where people want to be a little bit careful, and then arguing that everyone kind of needs to make that decision for themselves. So you wouldn't want to start out with any of the examples. You would just want to start out with that big picture statement of what the author's actual position is in regards to the topic they're discussing. So I know that several of you started out talking about the issue of sharing online, but my question then is, okay, well, where does Johnson stand on this? What is his actual position? Because I need to see that you all understand that Johnson is actually in favor of sharing online as long as it's done carefully and ethically. And if you haven't gotten that part, then I won't be entirely convinced that you really understood his argument. The other thing to consider when talking about the thesis statement from the article is that the thesis, remember, is the broadest, most general part of the discussion, and it's going to need to be comprehensive of everything that gets included in the author's argument. So if there's anything in your summary that wouldn't be covered by your thesis, then you're going to have to go back and rework your thesis to make sure that it is actually comprehensive of all of the points that you're going to talk about. So let me give you another example from Jessica Peck's or Nikki's assignment here. For example, this is another one that talks about the topic but not necessarily Johnson's opinion. So this says the article sets forth Johnson's opinion on sharing private information on the internet, but I'm still wondering what exactly is his opinion. Don't just say it gives us Johnson's opinion, tell us exactly what Johnson's opinion is. And then along with that, there are several points that get covered in this discussion that aren't necessarily worked into this representation of the thesis. So if you go to the end here, there's actually a much better representation of what Johnson's actual argument is that people need to understand the repercussions of sharing something and make a decision for themselves. That's not covered in the representation of the thesis here. So you're going to have to make this paraphrase of the thesis much broader so that it does include all the benefits of sharing online, but also the dangers of sharing online and how Johnson says it can be done ethically. The other thing I want to point out is that you need to be paraphrasing all of the author's key points in your own words. There were a lot of places where several of you were maybe quoting or you were paraphrasing but not exactly putting it entirely into your own words. So I wanted to point out a good example of that in one of the stronger summary drafts that I saw, which was Luke's. Luke, you did a very good job with this overall, and for those of you who are looking for places where you could put things into your own words and how to do so, Luke has a few good examples of that. So this one is talking about Dawn of the Digital Natives, and instead of being really specific about the flaws in the study here, Luke paraphrases this and puts it in his own words. I would say that the examples toward the end of this paragraph are a little too specific, and I would like to see this paraphrased more generally. So just something about the fact that the statistics are inconsistent and that the NEA manipulated the scale of the increase to fudge the data a little bit or to misrepresent the data. That's all you really have to say. You don't have to give us the specifics of the numbers and the scale itself. Just generalize about what happened and what Johnson is saying are the flaws in the study, kind of like you're doing up here and here. All right, so let me look at a couple of other good examples that we saw. One thing that I did notice lots of you guys are doing is including a whole lot of evidence and factual examples from the articles in your summary. And remember, when summarizing, you just want to stick to the thesis and the main points, and you want to avoid giving any of those specific examples because that's going to make your summary just as long as the original, and you're not going to be concise enough or be able to prove to me that you understood it well enough to scale it down and just focus on the main ideas. So let's look at Jessica's example here. Anytime that you have a specific piece of evidence, you can always reverse it by saying, well, what is the overall point that Johnson is, or the author is trying to make with this evidence, and how can I represent that in my own words instead of talking about the evidence itself? So even here, where Jessica is talking about blogging, I would say blogging is almost too specific of an example to include in your summary because it's not just blogging that he talks about. He talks about blogging, he talks about Twitter, he talks about Facebook a little bit. So I would just generalize all of that into a general discussion of ways that people share in social media. And you also don't even have to talk about any of the specific writers that Johnson references. Really, you can just put the ideas into your own words, kind of like you're doing here. So I thought there was some really good paraphrase in here, but you just want to avoid any specific evidence or examples. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the attributive tags that you all are using. Let's see, let me go up to another example. I want to try to touch on as many of these as I can. I don't think I've talked about Andrew's yet. So let's look at an example of where we could maybe have some attributive tags. Andrew's got some good ones in almost every single sentence. So maybe this isn't the best example. Yep, Andrew, I would say you're good on attributive tags. Let me look at Katie's really quickly here. Let's see, Johnson argues, he reasons, and then we get into some information that is from the article but that doesn't get attributed to Johnson. And then there's more down here. So it's not enough to just kind of go every couple of sentences with an attributive tag. You actually need to have attributive tags in every single sentence that includes some of Johnson's ideas, and in a summary that's basically going to be every single sentence. And then as you can see here, this one is missing a works cited page. So just make sure that you all include the works cited. There is a sample essay under content, and you can actually just copy the works cited entry from the sample because it is correct. All right, if you have any questions about your draft or would like further specific feedback, please send me an email. Otherwise, good luck with your comment.